Track throughout the day. The day began for the rocket back with fuel and oxidizer loading at about 7:44 in the morning here in Houston, or 6:44 at night out there in Baikonur, and was completed about 2 hours later. The vehicle's control systems have been prepared, gyros activated just minutes before launch. Good afternoon, everybody. We're here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I'm Dan Hewitt, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Mr. Reed Wiseman, a man who knows a thing or two about launching aboard a Soyuz rocket to the International Space Station.
Hey, Dan, good morning. It's great to be here. It's always a blast to be sitting in Mission Control in Houston, and even more fun to know that three of your buddies are on a rocket getting ready to head up to low Earth orbit.
Yeah, and everything's looking great, and we're going to be answering some of your questions throughout our broadcast today. So if you have any questions, make sure to send them to us using the hashtag AskNASA, and we'll get to those a little bit later. For now, though, everybody here in Mission Control supporting the launch today, but they're not the only ones, as they're working with flight controllers around the globe as we get ready to increase the crew of Expedition 55 from 3 to 6 crew members with the launch of NASA astronauts Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold and Russian cosmonaut Oleg Artemyev representing Roscosmos.
So, Dan, I know these three very well. I flew in space in 2014 with Oleg Artemyev. He is one of the most genuinely kind people I've ever met. He loves to drink chocolate milk when he's up there, and he loves taking pictures out the window. And then, obviously, Drew and Ricky, two NASA astronaut buddies of all of ours, really, and it'll be a blast to see them heading up to space.
All right, and they're going to be heading up, and they're going to do a 34.5 orbit flight to the International Space Station. That takes about 2 days for them to arrive, and they're scheduled to dock this coming Friday at 2:41 p.m. Central Time, 10:41 p.m. over in Moscow, where colleagues, friends, and family of the crew will be in the Russian Mission Control Center to watch the events unfold. The Soyuz MS-08 spacecraft is going to be docking with the Poisk module at a port on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the space station.
So that flight up is it's a real rush. It's only about 8.5 minutes of powered flight. We'll get into that later. And then you got the time to catch up to the space station. Back in 2014 when I flew, it was only about 6 hours to get there. They're going to do a longer profile, 2 days in orbit. They'll have a little bit of time to get adjusted to that microgravity environment before they dock to the space station. And then that time when you get to see that space station come into view out the window and you know that's your home for the next 6 months, it's kind of welcoming, actually. It's beautiful, beautiful sight to behold up there.
It's got to be otherworldly. Well, they're going to be joining the current station residents on board, NASA astronaut Scott Tingle, Russian cosmonaut, and the current Expedition 55 commander Anton Shkaplerov from Roscosmos, and JAXA astronaut Norishige Kanai. Tingle, Shkaplerov, and Kanai have been on board the station since December 17th of last year, so they've been up there for about 3 months already.
So they've been up there, and they've been part of a 6-person crew mainly, and then just a few weeks ago, 3 of their crewmates came home. So they've really had this enormous orbital outpost all to themselves for the last couple of days, and it's amazing to be in this huge vehicle. The International Space Station as just a crew of 3. You can actually go almost an entire day without seeing another crewmate. It gets real quiet. You know, all the work that you're doing is your own. The other interesting thing for Scott and Norishige is they're both rookies. So when their crewmates went home, now they have ownership of this space station for the first time in their lives, and you feel an awesome sense of responsibility when you kind of take the keys to the car. And then they're going to welcome 3 new crewmates on board, and all of them are seasoned space flyers that are coming up. So it should just be, hey guys, shake hands and get right to work.
Yeah, ready to hit the ground running. Well, here in Houston, the team in Mission Control is going to be ready to support them, and they're also monitoring today's launch and getting updates on the flight from their Russian counterparts. Flight Director Matt Abbott in the blue shirt on the bottom of your screen there is on console for today's launch. And our Capcoms today are Kathy Bolt and Tracy Caldwell-Dyson. They're the voices that are communicating with the crew in space right now. But during the Soyuz's climb to orbit, tracking and telemetry, all of the data gets sent back down to ground stations along the flight path, and all of that gets routed to the Russian Mission Control Center, seen here from a balcony camera. That's in Koryov, Russia, just outside of Moscow. But as Reed just said, 3 spaceflight veterans are going to be launching today aboard this Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station, so let's take a few moments to get to know them a little bit more. Starting off with NASA astronaut Drew Feustel, who's going to be serving as a Soyuz flight engineer. He's going to be in the left seat. He's a fan of automotive and motorcycle racing, a bit of a gearhead, also enjoys auto restoration, guitar, and skiing, and he was raised in Lake Orion, Michigan. He's got a Bachelor's of Science in Solid Earth Sciences and a Master of Science in Geophysics from Purdue University, and then a PhD from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. And then before he became an astronaut, Dr. Feustel worked as a geophysicist for the Engineering Seismology Group in Ontario, Canada, and then as an exploration geophysicist for the ExxonMobil Exploration Company here in Houston, Texas. He was selected back in July of 2000 as part of NASA's 18th astronaut class. Then following 2 years of evaluation, Feustel got assigned technical duties in the astronaut office's Space Shuttle and Space Station branches, later serving as a mission specialist on 2 different Space Shuttle missions. Then on the 5th and final Hubble Space Telescope servicing mission, STS-125, Feustel was a lead spacewalker, logging a total of 20 hours and 58 minutes in space over the course of 3 spacewalks. And then during STS-134, he got the chance to make a trip to the International Space Station to help deliver the alpha magnetic spectrometer, and then gain another 21 hours and 20 minutes of spacewalking time over the course of 3 spacewalks on that flight. And he's going to be venturing into space for the 3rd time today. And so while becoming an astronaut was always a dream of Drew Feustel's, it wasn't his only dream. He told us about that and a little bit more while he was wrapping up his training in Star City.
The first thing you might not know about Drew Feustel is I actually hold dual U.S. and Canadian citizenship. It's true that that association is through marriage, but I can tell you that the family of my maternal grandmother actually immigrated to Canada from the U.S., so there's that. I taught myself how to barefoot water ski at the age of 14, and I can tell you that I've swallowed a lot of lake water because of that special skill. You're going to like number 3. I actually have a mild fear of heights, but apparently that doesn't affect me 250 miles above the planet in a spacesuit, but it is there. My wife, Indra, and I have 2 boys by the names of Ari and Aiden. They were both born on the exact same day, exactly 2 years apart, on April 26th in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Natural birth, that's what I call planning. I grew up with 2 dreams in my life. The first was to become a Formula 1 race car driver. The second was to become an astronaut.
And Drew Feustel is going to be serving along on his long-duration mission with veteran Russian cosmonaut Oleg Artemyev, who's going to be making his 2nd trip to space today. Born in Riga, Latvia, Artemyev graduated from the Tallinn Polytechnic Institute back in 1990 and went on to earn a degree in low-temperature physics and technology from the Moscow Bauman Technical University in 1998. He began working at Energia Rocket Space Corporation in '98, and by May of 2003 was assigned to the Energia Cosmonaut Corps, starting his basic training the following month at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia. He was certified as a test cosmonaut in July of 2005. Then Artemyev took part in the Mars 500 experiment in 2007 as a participant in the 14-day-long test, and then again in 2009 as part of a 105-day-long preparatory experiment. And then his first flight started aboard Soyuz TMA-12M in March of 2014, where he served as a Soyuz flight engineer and then as an Expedition 3940 flight engineer. During that time, completed 2 spacewalks with a total duration of 12 hours, 33 minutes outside the station, but he also served alongside one Reed Wiseman of NASA.
He certainly did, Dan. And one thing you can see in these photos, Oleg, is this gentleman is always smiling. He is just a super positive guy, happy to be anywhere, really. He's super happy to be in space, and it's a joy every day. You come out of your crew quarters in the morning, and he's already getting himself to work, taking photos of his homeland and his friends for people on the ground, and keeping up communications with all of his buddies, always doing outreach outreach with children whenever he can. He's a genuine human being, and I know that Drew and Ricky will have a blast flying with him.
Yeah, and it sounds like they're pretty fortunate to have him on board. He already has more than 169 days in space. He's going to be the commander of this Soyuz vehicle today, and then a flight engineer for 55 and 56 expeditions. But one more person inside that Soyuz today, and that's NASA astronaut Ricky Arnold, who's going to be making his second trip to space today. Arnold was born in Cheverly and raised in Bowie, Maryland, and then he has a Bachelor of Science from Frostburg State University in Maryland. He began work as an oceanographic technician at the United States Naval Academy in 1987. Then upon completing his teacher certification program, accepted a position as a science teacher at John Hanson Middle School in Waldorf, Maryland. From there, he completed a Master of Science from the University of Maryland, and then after graduation, worked as a science and math teacher at a variety of schools all over the globe, actually, going to Casablanca, Morocco, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, West Papua, Indonesia, and then Bucharest, Romania. Arnold was selected to be an astronaut candidate in May of 2004, then went on to participate in the 2 years of astronaut candidate training as part of NASA's 19th astronaut class, alongside classmates and fellow educator mission specialist Joe Akava and Dottie Metcalf-Lindenberger. He flew on Space Shuttle Discovery as part of STS-119's mission to deliver the final solar array wing to the International Space Station in March of 2009, participating in 2 spacewalks, racking up a total of 12 hours and 34 minutes. And then in honor of his role in the ongoing year of education, NASA's Ricky Arnold offered up some little-known trivia about his teaching career. Let's take a look.
I graduated from college and was working at the United States Naval Academy in the oceanography department, and that's when I first considered becoming a teacher. My first teaching job was at the John Hanson Middle School in Waldorf, Maryland, and even though I was a science teacher, I actually taught 2 classes of social studies to go along with four classes of science. I coached high school basketball in Maryland at the Thomas Stone High School, as well as in Casablanca, Morocco, and in Bucharest, Romania. I played a guitar in rock and roll bands with fellow faculty members, administrators, and even some parents, both in Casablanca, Morocco, and in Bucharest, Romania. My first teaching job was in an open space science classroom with no running water. And I realized when I could get through my first year of teaching, I had really accomplished something.
And for now, we're back with a live view of the Soyuz on the launch pad there in Baikonur. The launch pad service structure components are going to begin lowering shortly, and those clamshell-like gantry service towers, those big towers around the rocket, are going to be retracted in preparation for the actual liftoff. That usually comes about 45 minutes or so before the launch. Real quick, we do have a countdown timeline to run through. Again, you'll see those clamshell, those big towers around the rocket start to retract. And then at 4 minutes before launch, combustion chamber nitrogen purge. That uses nitrogen to remove any excess fumes or vapors from fuel in the combustion chamber. T-minus 245, the booster propellant tanks actually get pressurized. That helps to optimize the flow of fuel and actually adds some rigidity and structural integrity to the rocket. The first umbilical tower will separate at 35 seconds before launch, the second at 15 before launch, and then shortly after that, the launch command is issued, and then we're pretty much right there at the liftoff, T-minus 0 and launch. Reed, do you guys really get to see any of that stuff happening, or what's it look like when you're in the Soyuz? Can you feel like when the tower breaks away or anything like that?
That first tower that you were talking about 45 minutes prior to launch, you don't know that that tower is backing away. But you do know that the escape system has been activated around 40 minutes prior to launch, and that's your indication that that egress path out of the capsule down that gantry is now gone. And if you had to get off the vehicle quickly, you'd do it through the escape system. And then as you're approaching that T-minus 0 time, you do feel and hear, it's very, very subtle, but you do hear those servicing umbilicals break away right before liftoff.
And I mean, what's kind of the general atmosphere inside the capsule when are you hearing like bangs and bumps and stuff? Because I know the helmets get closed. Are you just kind of hearing what's through your radio? What's it feel like inside?
I call it a hyper awareness. At least when you first get in there, you're in there 2.5 hours prior to launch. So if you're a rookie, the first thing that you're thinking about is everything. You can feel the wind buffeting the vehicle. You hear your cabin fans running, and occasionally you'll hear a thump, and you'll be like, what is that? And I flew with Max Sarayev. Right, it could be somebody knocking. You never know. And but then after you calm down about 15 minutes after you get on board, you're really just relaxed. You're talking to your communicator on ground who you know really well, and you're listening to music. You're joking with your crewmates, and you're just getting ready for launch. It really is amazing how calming it is before liftoff.
Just strapped in and ready to go. All right, well, we got a couple of minutes, so we told you we were going to take some questions, so why don't we take some questions now? The first one we got up from Astrid Vanderberg wanted to know, how long do astronauts have to wait until they actually lift off, until they arrive, once they arrive at the pad? I think you actually just kind of answered this. It's about
It's about 2.5 hours before liftoff. That's when you get in the vehicle. You arrive out to the pad maybe a half an hour before that. You go through a few ritual ceremonies that the Russians like to do, the blessing of the spacecraft, and then you climb on board your elevator, you head up, and the neat thing about that is you're riding an elevator up alongside this Soyuz rocket, and it is just sheeted in ice. All the fuels are loaded. It's venting and creaking, and you can just tell this big machine is alive with a lot of power. And so that ride up the elevator is pretty inspiring.
It's kind of imposing almost, I would think.
It is surreal. And, you can see tonight this is a night launch, and ours was a night launch in 2014 when I flew. And so it's dark out, but the rocket's pretty well lit up. So it's pretty spectacular to see that on the bus when you approach.
All right. Our next question comes from Othan Ruiz Martinez. Wanted to know, what do astronauts eat before their launch? Is there a traditional meal? Is it kind of whatever the heck you want? What do you guys eat?
Whatever you want. I had like a little power bar, an energy bar with me that I ate. I ate in the bus right before I headed out to the pad. Before that, you all wake up and you have a kind of ceremonial crew breakfast or dinner, whatever it would be. So for these folks, they would have woken up from a nap and had some sort of a traditional Russian breakfast, and then you head out to the pad. And you know it's going to be a while before you're going to get to eat again. So that's why take an energy bar, take a little bottle of water with you, and have your last meal as you're getting off the bus.
I feel like I'd be bringing a couple of pizzas on the bus or something.
That would be great.
All right, our next one comes from Cindy Ward. What kind of personal items do you guys get to bring up with you on the trip? You get a small amount of cargo you can bring with you, right?
I'd say it's about a shoebox size amount of cargo. And so generally you want to fly things for your friends, things for your family, little trinkets. You could take anything. I know Oleg Artemyev will have a couple stuffed animals with him. He loves taking up things for kids and his friends. I had a bunch of pictures. Pictures, they weigh almost nothing, and they're great memories. And so I had a lot of pictures with me when I flew. But really, it's up to you what you want to fly, and you can make those selections as long as you just tell NASA what you're going to fly. They don't want anything with batteries or rechargeables of any kind. Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think we got time for one more real quick. Long duration. So this comes from Jamie Tucker. He said, long duration, that's a year in space, right?
We consider long duration just about anything over 2 weeks. So these guys will spend 6 to 7 months up there. We know that Scott Kelly did almost a year in space. And then just after him, Peggy Whitson was up there for over 300 days. That's pretty long duration in my book.
That is pretty long duration. All right. Well, again, we're going to be answering your questions several times throughout today's broadcast. So if you have any, send them to us. Use the hashtag AskNASA, and we'll get to them a little bit later. But in just a couple of seconds, we're going to be seeing what the crew's been up to so far today. As Reed talks about, it starts off kind of waking up at the Cosmonaut Hotel. How nice is the Cosmonaut Hotel? That's got to be pretty decent accommodations.
Actually, it's extremely decent accommodations, and it's a neat place to live. Generally, the crew is fairly isolated from everyone else, and you have some training events while you're out there. But for the most part, it's pretty relaxing, and you're living in quarantine. So here are some shots of that.
All right. Well, the crew woke up at about 3:44 a.m. Central Time this morning. It was 2:44 in the afternoon in Baikonur, so it's about 9 hours prior to launch. And then they did all of their final pre-launch activities. So, Reed, walk us through what are we seeing right now?
In Russia, a lot of things are linked to tradition. So this is a tradition of signing your bedroom door before you leave, and you can see all the other signatures on there. I just saw Scott Tingle, who's on the space station right now, right above Drew there, and you can see Ricky signing his door for his bedroom. It's all just steeped in tradition.
God bless you.
Here you see the crew getting blessed by the Russian Orthodox priest. This is another time-honored tradition. And then usually there's some water. Yep, there's some water that gets sprayed on the crew, so you got to be prepared for that. And it's up to each crew member whether or not they want to participate in this. But to me, everything that they do over there is interesting, and it holds a lot of tradition and significance. And so most of our astronauts will go through the ceremonies with their cosmonaut colleagues. And then this is probably the coolest part, which is walking out of the cosmonaut hotel. They have a traditional Russian song, which is titled basically Earth in the Window, that they are playing, and it's very motivating. You can see all of your trainers are out there. These are Russian folks you've gotten to know very well over your year and a half of training, and then you're heading off and getting on the bus, rolling to the pad. You can see they've got these white undershirts on, and that signifies that they've gone through their alcohol swabs to clean their skin, and these are basically sanitized clothing that they wear before they get into their spacesuits. So whenever you see the crews in those white mock turtlenecks there, you know that's the prime crew getting ready to get on the vehicle for the day and get the job done.
And so why do we keep them because we've always said we keep them in quarantine. Why are we doing that with the crew members?
So we keep them in quarantine to make sure they don't have any sort of bacteria or sickness in general. And then that day of launch, we try to wipe them down almost entirely with alcohol. And then they take skin swab samples just to see if you have any sort of, I guess, alien life form on you before you climb on the rocket. So obviously we don't want to get the crew on orbit sick, and their immune system's been suppressed because they've been in space for 3 or 4 months at this time. So just carrying up any virus would be very dangerous for the crew on board.
All right, well, definitely a little bit more intensive than just getting dressed for work, but here we see even more intensive as, they're not just throwing on that flight suit, now they're getting into their launch and entry suits. So, I mean, what's it like to go through this process? Why are you guys wearing that suit for the flight up? I mean, what's going on?
So we obviously are wearing this suit, the Sokol pressure suit, and that is in the event of any sort of depressurization in the cabin during ascent or rendezvous, we have this backup means on board. And this would, even at a full vacuum in the capsule, if we lost all of our atmosphere inside the Soyuz, this Sokol suit would keep us alive. And so this time when you're getting in the suit is kind of surreal. You've put it on in simulators hundreds of times, but now you have technicians there helping you get this suit on, and this is the outfitting for real. And so you can see Drew's face there is pretty serious, and it is a very quiet and serious time right now as you get suited up. And then on the other side of that curtain right behind where they're suiting up, your family's probably waiting for that last goodbye. And so you're pretty excited to get through there and see those folks.
Yeah, I imagine it's all got to be kind of setting in. This is the real deal. Well, the crew, so they get suited up at a facility called the Integration and Suit-Up Facility, also called Building 254. And these guys got there at about 7:29 in the morning here in Houston. It was 6:29 over there in Baikonur. So they undergo some final medical exams and then get suited up. And then, as Reed said, they'll soon get to talk to their friends and family. I mean, what's it feel like to be in the suit like that? Is it constricting? Is it comfortable? I mean, it's probably not, like wearing your sweatpants on the couch, but
you would really be surprised. As long as it is not pressurized, it's custom made for you, using your own body measurements, and it's actually a fairly comfortable suit, especially when you're sitting like this with the visor open. You can see there Ricky, the visor's behind his head right now. He doesn't have his gloves on, so it's a fairly comfortable suit to sit in. You get full range of motion. The difference would be if they had a failure on board and that suit pressurized, then it becomes a pretty rigid safety system, and then it is not the most comfortable. You get warm. You can see those blue hoses coming off the left side of each crew member. You can hook those up to cooling fans. It looks like they're actually hooked up right there, and that just runs a little bit of air through your suit and keeps you cool.
All right, well, and then after they're suited up, you guys move into another room, and what are they going to do in here? Aside from, it looks like they also now get the chance to see some friends and family gathered on the other side of that glass partition.
Right, so there's a little bit of fun involved here, but the main purpose of this room, you can see Oleg Artemyev right there getting into a Soyuz seat, and they will pressurize his spacesuit to make sure that it is leak checked before he goes out to the pad. So each crew member will go through this. It's It's a very formalized event. I mean, we take it extremely seriously. This is your last chance before you climb on the rocket to test your spacesuit. But then the other part of this is fun is once you've got your leak check complete, you get to walk over to that window and you have a little microphone and you get to say hi to your family and friends. They give you about 20 or 30 minutes, which is, in my opinion, way too much time. You're nervous, you want to get to the rocket, and you just kind of want to say your goodbyes and say your I love yous and then move on to the rocket. So sometimes you got to think of a few funny stories to tell your friends as you're sitting there.
And we actually just saw it looked like Oleg's suit was kind of puffing up a little bit. So you actually you take it up to that full pressure, which it would be at if necessary. So is it pressurized the whole time you're in the Soyuz, or would it only pressurize in the event of a pressure loss in the cabin?
It only pressurizes in the event of a pressure loss in the cabin. So it's tough to see on this shot, but there's a blue knob kind of right in front of Drew's face there. It's pretty hard to see, but that controls your pressure. So there it is on Oleg, right below his name tag there. That blue knob controls your pressure. So if you close that down, your suit will start to pressurize. We also have on the Soyuz, we have fans that are running ventilation through that suit the whole time, so you're getting good cooling. But in the event of a failure, yeah, then the suit would puff up, and that's providing the pressure on your body to keep you alive, really, to keep your blood from boiling. And then, so I mean, kind of walk us back. Do you remember your time in this room? Are there nerves at all at this point? Like, because we've kind of touched on, it's the real deal now. You've put the suit on 100 times in a simulator, but now you're putting it on to go to outer space. I gotta say, every crew member is going to experience this differently. I was a rookie when I went through this, and I will tell you, I was extremely nervous at this point. You have a lot of adrenaline flowing through you. You're going out to your rocket. You're seeing your family for the last time in potentially 6 months, and there is a lot of emotion going through your head at this point in time. These are all seasoned space flyers. I think they know the challenges that they're about to face, and so I'm sure their own personal experiences are a bit different than mine, but certainly this is, you can kind of see it on their faces. This is a fairly tense time before you're heading out to the rocket. Well, also, talk to us about the Soyuz seat a little bit, because each seat is special for the crew members, correct? So you can see you are packed into that seat. Your feet are way up, and before you launch, about a year before you launch, they run a plaster mold in Moscow of your body. So you sit in that seat with a plaster mold around you, and then they carve out your seat liner inside that seat bucket so that it fits you exactly correctly. And that's because our landing loads and launch loads are pretty high. It's a lot of force on the human body, and so we want that seat to fit you like a glove. Really, that's what we're trying to do. If there's any sort of gaps, you could have an injury on landing, and I'll tell you, they do an amazing job, Dan, on that seat. They build it right the first time, and if you got any issues, they'll fix it. And we've had crew members coming back for years in the Soyuz, and everybody's come back healthy. Man, it looks super stunning. We see Drew taking a selfie with the family, I think it looks like, and all of our crew members, and we'll reiterate this throughout the broadcast, but they're on social media, so you can follow their trips on Twitter and Instagram, on their various accounts, both Ricky Arnold and Drew Feustel, which, again, at this point, getting a chance to wave and talk to their family and kind of say, so is this the last time you get to see the friends and family before you launch? This is it, Dan. So you're at this window. They're on the other side of that window so that the crew stays in quarantine. And then when you walk out, you get onto the bus, and you may get to wave to your family from the bus, but the next destination for this crew, I gotta tell you, they look pretty relaxed. The next destination for this crew is gonna be their Soyuz rocket.
Oh, okay.
Kathy have potato chips for us.
I got to put the best.
Yeah, Mom and Dad will say you can watch it right before.
Close today.
Yeah, so they're trying to do it Friday for the matchup.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Jim was shaded out. Yeah, it was like,
Олег Арtemyev, здесь мы на Земле будем обеспечены.
going to provide all the support to you here on the ground, along with our colleagues from NASA. Everybody who is remaining on the ground is going to provide support to you. We'll be looking forward to seeing you on the ground.
The NASA team's ready to support you. All the ground folks are all ready. They're all ready for a great expedition. Take good care of Space Station for us. Enjoy your time on Support Station. We have plenty of exciting research, lots of great work for you, lots of great EVAs. You'll have a great time on station. So do your part and take care of Station, leave it in better shape than when you arrived.
Thanks, Bill.
We'll all be here on the ground, ready to support you. So have a great time up there. And if you need anything, give us a call.
Thanks. We'll be sure to wait every time we fly overhead.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt.
All right, and then after suit up, and they just had a moment there to talk to some of the management from NASA and Roscosmos, and then it's the walk out to the bus.
Yeah, this is definitely a surreal time. You can see in their left hand, they're holding their little ventilators that's keeping air running through their suit to keep them cool. And they stop on these white squares, very formal. And then the chief designer for the Soyuz is going to probably wish them well on their trip. And a couple last pictures, then off to the bus.
All right, well, they walked out at about 8:44 p.m. at night in Baikonur. And again, this is to get on the bus and then the ride over to launch pad number 1. That drive takes about 25 minutes. But again, one last chance to wave farewell to everybody. And then it was on to the rocket. And they arrived again about 25 minutes later at 9:09 p.m. over there in Baikonur. And then they're helped off by some various members of management and support staff from the partner agencies. So Roscosmos and NASA represented on this flight. So we'll see a couple of faces we just saw. Some of the NASA folks over there include Bill Gerstenmaier, the Associate Administrator for Human Exploration and Operations for NASA, and Kirk Shireman, the International Space Station Program Manager. And as you can tell from the outfits, pretty fortuitous weather for a March launch, as we got the report temperatures right around 53 degrees. So normally I feel like when we do these March launches, it's freezing.
Yeah, I think they're glad they're not in the northeast of the U.S. right now getting hit by the snowstorm rolling through there. You can see, Dan, it's a tradition to help the crew walk to the boarding ladder. To me, that was always one of the scariest parts of the flight because it's hard to walk when you have two people holding on to you on either side. But up the ladder you go. It's a time-honored tradition as well to give the crew a little, I'll call it, help up the ladder. So if you see any of their knees or feet help the crew up the ladder as they go, that's also a tradition.
Well, I would imagine, because those stairs don't look the easiest to navigate under normal conditions, let alone when you're wearing an entire spacesuit. But they're managing, and so this is kind of the last time you see this many people gathered in one place for 6 months, isn't it?
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
This is waving goodbye to planet Earth.
As you can see from the number of flashes going off at night, you don't even see them because you're blinded, and then you have those flashes in your eyes every time you blink for the next 20 minutes. But here they go up the final steps up that ladder, and then these technicians here are going to load them on the elevator that you see in front of the crew, and then they're going to take that ride up to enter their vehicle.
And so what's it like being that close to the rocket at that moment? I mean, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you hearing when you're feet away from the rocket that you're about to climb on top?
The biggest thing is you want to reach out and touch it, but you can't. And it's covered in ice. It's creaking. It's alive. You can see all the steam coming off of it as you're riding up. So now you're a part of your vehicle as you're heading up there. There's a few Russian technicians that are with you. One gentleman will probably help them strap in, but aside from that, you can tell that you're becoming more and more alone as part of your crew as you ride this elevator up and get ready to get on your rocket.
And we're back now with a live view of the Soyuz. You can see a whole lot more of the rocket now as those gantry towers have retracted. We're actually 20 counting away from launch. The 3 newest Expedition 55 crew members getting ready to head to the International Space Station. This mission is going to be launching under the call sign Hawaii, chosen by the Soyuz commander Oleg Artemyev, based on some conversations the crew had pre-flight about all their different travels around the Earth to various locations. Reed, do you remember what your call sign was?
We were Cephei, which is a constellation Cepheus, and that is what my Russian commander had used on his previous flight, and he liked that call sign, so he used it. And I just wanted to say that is Oleg to a T right there. To ask his crewmates what they want to be for their call sign, and then to pick it and go with it. He's a very giving person.
All right, well, the crew, along with the call sign, also has a mission patch for this Soyuz spacecraft. Shaped like a Soyuz descent module, that metal portion of the Soyuz craft where the crew is going to be strapped in. The crew's names appear on the top of the design, and then the colors of the Russia and U.S. flags appear at the bottom on either side of the Roscosmos logo. It's modeled after an iconic Russian photograph. The scene depicted in the body of the patch shows the 3 crew members approaching their launch vehicle, all in silhouette. The space station appears above as it is their destination. The moon is shown behind the launch complex and Mars in the sky to help epitomize the dreams of future human voyages even deeper into space. 6 stars in the sky represent the 6 crew members of the ISS crew. And then the Russian space launch base is in Kazakhstan. That's portrayed by the outline of the science statue located in Baikonur and by a tulip from the Lenin's town coat of arms. Have you seen that statue in Baikonur, Reed?
Of course, we pay a visit to that statue along with a few others before we launch in Baikonur, especially as a backup crew. When you're 6 months prior to launch, you go out in town a little bit more than the prime crew because we want to keep them healthy and under wraps. But Baikonur is an interesting place. There's a lot of history there, and a lot of history and a lot of neat, I'd almost say Cold War relics around town, but some great statues from earlier times, in the times of Yuri Gagarin.
All right, well, the Soyuz rocket itself also carrying its own patch, sporting a design this spring, and that's a logo celebrating the 20th anniversary of the International Space Station. That first element, Zarya, was launched back in 1998 on November 20th atop a Russian Proton rocket, not from the same launch pad, but from the same area, the Baikonur Cosmodrome there in Kazakhstan. And as we'll see in some interior views of the descent module where the crew is housed, there's going to be a few toys used as zero-G indicators during the flight up. One of which is a small toy wolf. I'm going to butcher this, but Zubivaka, I think is what it is, commemorating, I got the thumbs up from Reed, commemorating the World Cup soccer tournament, which is being hosted in Russia this year beginning in June. And again, so that's the zero-G signifier. When we get some in-cabin views, we'll see them hanging up just over. And so, I mean, what do you remember what you guys used? And I mean, why are they floating there?
First of all, we definitely, of course, remember what we used. That's a very intimate part of the flight for the crew members. We had a giraffe that my daughter had that she wanted to fly, and then Alex Gerst had a little mouse that he flew, and we really hang them there. Originally, before I launched, I thought that it was just a symbolic tradition, but in reality, they're very good data tools. You can see, especially when third stage lights off, you can see that talisman floating, or not floating, but the string is being pulled tight, because when third stage comes on, it's actually a very, very weak feeling at first, and you're wondering, is it running, is it not? You look right up at your stuffed animal hanging by a string, and of course, yep, you know that third stage is running. You can see the trajectory is good, and then when third stage cuts out and you're in orbit, then you can see your talisman floating, and it's just a great feeling to be watching that thing float around.
I'm in space, that kind of feeling, I would imagine. All right, well, we're still counting down. We're under 20 minutes now. We're 19 minutes, 40 seconds and counting away from launch. Drew Feustel, Ricky Arnold, and Oleg Artemyev on board the Soyuz spacecraft. Suit leak checks have been underway now. I think we got the thumbs up already on those, and the emergency escape system gets armed. That escape tower would fire in the event of any issues during launch. It's, if you look at the Soyuz rocket, the tiny little nozzles at the very top of the rocket. Those fire, and they're designed to pull the spacecraft and the crew clear of the booster, enabling the capsule to parachute down to a safe landing in the event of an emergency during the launch or the early stages of the climb to orbit. And I think you mentioned you know when some of that stuff's getting armed. Can you feel it when that thing gets jettisoned during the climb to orbit?
The escape tower itself, you can tell that got jettisoned, but it's really when that shroud falls away with the Cyrillic lettering that you see there on that image. When that shroud comes away, you're very up close and personal with that moment of your flight. And that's the first time you can look out the windows, and if the sun is up, you can see the Earth below you. You can also see all the little spring pushers and locks and things kind of floating away from you as you're going up. And so you definitely know when that shroud has come away.
All right, and during that climb to orbit, all the data from the vehicle comes down to the ground along the flight path and then gets routed to a blockhouse actually near the launch pad in Baikonur, and then ultimately to the Russian Mission Control Center just outside of Moscow. The flight controlled from Baikonur of the rocket until shutdown of that third stage engine, and then oversight of the vehicle transfers over to the Russian Flight Control Center. And a quick timeline for you, and it is only about 9 minutes to get into outer space, which seems surreal how quick that is, but it is a 3-stage rocket. And so that first stage will fire for about 1 minute 58 seconds, and then it'll shut down, and that will consist of those 4 strap-on boosters that we'll see actually dropping away, and the core stage continuing, and then that shroud jettison at 2:41 that Reed was talking about. I think that's when you say you really notice it, and that's kind of your first view of the outside world, right?
If the sun is up, these guys are launching at night. If the sun is up, you can really see the Earth, and it's beautiful. For us, so it took us a little longer. That first stage shutdown, that you feel as the crew, because you just lost 4/5 of your acceleration right there. So you really feel like you're getting thrown forward in your seats, and then slowly second stage power comes on as the fuel weight burns down, and you're back up under 3 to 4 Gs. But that first stage shutdown, that's probably the most dynamic event you have until you reach orbit.
All right, and then that second stage shutdown and jettison coming at about 4 minutes 47 seconds into launch. Shortly after the third stage ignites, they use something called a hot staging technique. So if it were daytime, you could actually see some lattice-like structure between the second and third stages that allows that third stage to start firing while the second stage is still about to break away. Then third stage shutdown, 8 minutes and 45 seconds into the flight, the spacecraft separates, and then you're in outer space. That third stage shutdown also looks like a pretty provocative moment for the crew. You can see you guys, it looks like you get a bit of a jolt on that one.
It is incredibly provocative right there when third stage shuts down, mainly because you're losing basically 4 Gs, 4 times Earth's gravity and acceleration. So it's like you went from slamming on the accelerator to just having nothing behind you. And couple that with the fact that you're now weightless. If you're a rookie, weightless for the first time in your entire life. And all those forces on the human body are just confusing for, I would say, for me, about the first 4 days. But you adapt pretty quick. The human body is an amazing machine, and it adapts quickly to that microgravity environment.
All right after the Soyuz gets into orbit, we'll be listening for the calls, but a number of antennas and the solar arrays will deploy. The solar arrays obviously providing some power to the batteries, which power all of the systems on board the Soyuz spacecraft. And then the antennas needed for navigation and ultimately the docking. One of those really important ones, the core's automated rendezvous and docking antenna. Is the Soyuz spacecraft able to automatically dock to the International Space Station. Now Oleg will be standing by in the center seat if he needs to take over and fly it manually just in case. That's kind of like, just in case you have to fly a spacecraft to another spacecraft. That's got to be the coolest thing anybody's ever done. But yeah, immediately after they reach orbit, the crew will oversee a bunch of these automated commands, and then the spacecraft will begin its 2-day chase down of the International Space Station. All right, well, the rocket itself stands 162 feet tall, tipping the scales at 680,000 pounds. It consists of the Soyuz MS-08 spacecraft inside that protective shroud, and then the three-stage booster right below. The vehicles made it to the booster, and the three-stage joined together last Wednesday, and then began the trek out to the launch pad back on Monday, leaving the building right at 7 a.m., as is tradition, there in Baikonur, and then arriving just a little bit less than 2 hours later, where it was raised to vertical. And the spacecraft with its 3 crew members on board, sitting atop the 3 stages of that Soyuz booster, using kerosene and liquid oxygen as the propellant. The first stage consists of the 4 liquid engines, which are strapped to the side of the core vehicle. And as we talked about, each of those burns for about 1 minute and 58 seconds before they drop away. And in this animation, you can see those 4 on the side. And Reed, you just said that's providing a big chunk of your lift getting off the planet, right?
Oh, absolutely. The highest G-forces that the crew will feel on ascent is at the end of that first stage where they're up above 4G. And then the Russians call those the carrots, the Markovi. So when those carrots drop away there, you can see it in the animation. That's a huge loss of thrust for the crew. So it's a very dynamic phase of flight.
And then we see the shroud drop away. That core engine of the first stage also serves as the second stage. And once that's done, here you see that hot staging technique where the third stage will start to fire. The second stage's job done will drop away. And that third stage, single engine ignites and then continues the climb to the preliminary orbit. And that fires for just about until the 8-minute 45-second mark, and then spacecraft separation. I mean, what are those first moments in microgravity feel like for you?
They can be anything. They can be confusing. You can feel like you're tumbling. You can feel like you're falling. You can feel extreme euphoria that you're in low Earth orbit. It is so individual what those feelings are. But the thing that you can be guaranteed of is that you're not walking on Earth anymore. And so everything in your stomach is floating. The blood is kind of rushing to your head a little bit. And it's going to feel awkward at first, but you very quickly get used to it. If you can see the Earth out the window, you're treated to the most magnificent view a human could ever experience.
Yeah, and well, at the time of the launch, the station itself will be over the South Atlantic, just east of Argentina, at an altitude of about 257 statute miles. And the launch is precisely timed to line up the flight of the Soyuz to kind of get into the same orbital plane or the path as the International Space Station. That sets it up for that 2-day flight to the station, which culminates in a docking, which is scheduled for this Friday, March 23rd. It'll dock to the Poisk module at 2:41 p.m. Central Time here in Houston. It'll be 10:41 at night over in Moscow, where, again, team members from NASA and Roscosmos, as well as guests and family of the crew, will get to watch them dock to the International Space Station and begin the full 6-person crew of Expedition 55. And along with all of the NASA representatives over there in Baikonur, just a short distance away from the launch pad, NASA Public Affairs Officer Rob Navy is a fixture at these events, standing by. Why don't we go to him for a quick update?
Dan, spring has sprung on the steppe of Kazakhstan, and with temperatures downright balmy for this time of the year, all is in readiness for the first Soyuz launch of a space station crew this year. As was the case back in September, 2 Americans and a Russian are set to begin their journey to return the complex to a 6-person crew 2 days from now, just 3 weeks after 2 Americans and a Russian returned to Earth from their mission. U.S. and Russian space officials and a large gathering of family and friends are here at the Cosmodrome for this midnight ride for Feustel, Arnold, and Artemyev. After launch and a few hours of rest, we'll fly back to Moscow and await the arrival of the crew at the station on Friday. The Russian Mission Control Center outside Moscow is where we will be to bring you coverage of Friday's docking and hatch opening to culminate this initial crew rotation of 2018. In the meantime, what can be better than spring, Soyuz, station, and spaceflight? We have it all here in Baikonur, Dan, with launch time approaching. That's it from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Now back to you at Mission Control in Houston.
All right, well, back here in Mission Control Houston, we are under 10 minutes away from launch. We're 9 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. So now things will start to pick up in a couple of minutes. So why don't we take a few more Twitter questions. Again, if you have any, use that hashtag AskNASA. Why don't we go now to Stephen Lavelle, who asked, that's a long flight. What happened to the 6-hour transfers? Because they're going to be taking 2 days. So sometimes they're 6. So yours was 6. Sometimes they're 2 days. Why do we tend to differ between the two?
So we generally target that 6-hour rendezvous because it's the easiest on the crew. You get up there quickly and you start to work. To get that 6-hour rendezvous completed, it really takes perfect alignment of the space station and your launch vehicle. So it's an instantaneous launch window. The space station's got to be exactly located where it needs to be in its orbit, and you launch, and you're basically chasing down the space station very quickly. In some cases, maybe the space station had to do a debris avoidance maneuver a few weeks ago, and it changed that phasing of its orbit, or in this case, the launch slid by a few days about a month ago, and that just offset that chance for that 6-hour rendezvous. So we have to down mode to the 2-day rendezvous. And then I think on our next launch, we're back to 6 hours if everything holds.
So what do you guys usually prefer? You like the 6-hour? Because it seems like it's a really long day if you're doing it all in one day. Or do you like getting and not having to be in the Soyuz for 2 days?
It's a really long day on that 6-hour, but I think it's whichever one you took to get to the space station is the one you seem to prefer. Everybody that does a 2-day says that's the best for sure, and everybody that does the 6 hours is like, definitely 6-hour. You got to be a 6-hour flyer.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take one more from Jacob, who wanted to know, how does live video and audio get transmitted to Earth from the station so there's no interruptions?
So they're using Russian ground sites on their ascent, at least for most of it, and that's how we're getting it. When they're on orbit, then they're relaying it through kind of a, I won't say deep space network, but basically a TDRS type network where they relay the signal out a little bit deeper into space, and then it gets transmitted back down to Earth. So there's as you travel around Russia and the U.S., you'll see huge radio dishes on the ground, and they're just using that to transfer the signals back and forth.
All right. Well, again, keep sending those questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll try to get to a few more before the end of today's broadcast, but we're always answering them on social media as well. For now, though, we are under 7 minutes away. So at this point, first and second stages are ready for launch. Telemetry or data has been received from the rocket, and all the primary and backup systems are ready to go. And here we have a view inside the cabin.
So we have, there's going to be Drew Feustel and Oleg Artemyev, and there he has what we call the Ukaska, the pointer. For the commander, they sit a little further back, and it's hard for him to reach all the switches, so he's using that to enter some data. And then you can see their talisman. It looks like Oleg is playing with his talisman there. And I think it looks like Drew has one as well. And then just off screen is going to be Ricky Arnold, and we'll get to see some live shots of him later.
Yeah, and we do have some info. So for Drew, he has, it's called Kredek the Mole, also known as Krat in Russia. It's a cartoon character that was very popular throughout Europe from the 1950s through today. The creator from the Czech Republic, a larger one, actually flew with Drew and his crew back on STS-134. So we'll see a couple of zero-G indicators, and if we get a view of Ricky Arnold, I've just been told he actually has a small hula girl to commemorate the crew's call sign, Hawaii.
That's outstanding. Being from Maryland, I thought he would have a Baltimore Oriole mascot. I know he's a huge fan.
I would have supported that. All right, but at this point, again, we are 5.5 minutes away, and we just got word that the launch key has been inserted. Yes, it's an actual key. Somebody gets to carry around the launch key.
And if you're lucky after flight, you may get that key. I did not get mine from our flight, but I have seen the launch key from previous Soyuz. My commander had his from his first flight, and it is, no kidding, an actual physical key.
What does it look like?
It's a small key that you would put into like a small lock. It's not like a giant key. It's nothing fascinating. It doesn't look like it's out of a Harry Potter movie. It's just a regular old nondescript key.
I feel like we could have so much more fun with that. Like, make it shaped like a rocket or something. All right, so at this point, 4 minutes, 45 seconds and counting. System's going to be switching over to onboard controls. Those cockpit displays being activated. We saw Oleg with his little pointer object that he's going to be using to help send commands throughout the Soyuz's flight to the International Space Station. And the helmet's closed, putting them on that suit oxygen. I think, as you said, it's already constantly circulating, and they can control the pressure with that little valve on their suits.
And now the crew was sitting there. They have their visor down. They're pretty much ready for launch. Now they're just in wait mode. Like you said, the suit ventilation is running and keeping them cool. It's quite comfortable when you're in this mode. Your gloves are on, so now it's a little harder to turn the pages in your book. It looks actually like Oleg is using a tablet nowadays to review his flight data file, and that makes it a little bit easier.
All right, we just got the call. The fuel lines on the spacecraft or on the rocket are being purged with nitrogen. That helps to fireproof them, remove any of the excess vapors of that fuel and oxidizer that might be in the lines. 3.5 minutes away from launch. So 3.5 minutes away from launch. What's going through your head right now if you're in that rocket?
Now you're 100% ready. You don't want to wait anymore. You want those engines to ignite. One interesting thing, the person that they're talking to, the Russian flight controller that the crew is talking to, this person has trained you for about the last 1.5 years. So you're great friends. You know them super well. You probably know their family, and that's a real comforting voice. So the only person you're talking to right now outside the crew is that we call it Shesnatsy Treti. That's their call sign, and you know that person well.
All right, we are coming up on 2 minutes and 45 seconds, getting the thumbs up, the little fist bump from the crew there. Looks like they're definitely ready to go. And so at this point, the booster tanks are being pressurized for flight. This just helps to optimize the flow of all of that fuel. Also actually helps add some structural support to the rocket itself. Again, everything looking good. It's a night launch, so things are about to light up very much so there on the steppe of Baikonur in Kazakhstan. Teams only about a mile away watching the launch from NASA and Roscosmos. We are coming up on 2 minutes. Yeah, I don't know about you, but even watching here and not out there, you get excited. All right, 1 minute, 40 seconds away from launch. Everything continuing to count down. No issues with the rocket. Again, we're going to see some of those umbilical towers separate from the vehicle. When the second one separates, that means you're only 15 seconds away from liftoff. And those engines actually fire for quite a while, it seems, before you actually take off. Can you feel like that first fire, and then can you feel when you kind of leap off?
Yeah, you definitely can. It's not as aggressive as what I've heard a shuttle launch is like, but you can hear those engines start up, and then when they go up to 80%, you can feel the rumble in the rocket. I actually thought we were at liftoff at 80%, and my commander was laughing at me, and he said, no, about 2 or 3 more seconds, and then boom, you're underway, and you know it's a kick in the pants when you go.
It's like, Reed, no, we're still here. All right. 1 minute away.
1 minute prior to liftoff. Everything is nominal on board. We are ready for launch.
All right, still getting good calls. The vehicle now on internal power. There's that first umbilical separating away. Pretty soon we'll have auto sequence start. At this point, the ground propellant feed, so all the fuel flow into the rocket, has cut off. We are under 30 seconds.
Auto sequence initiated. Now we launch command issued for ignition.
And there you can see the engine starting to fire, ramping up. The second umbilical tower already separated.
Engine at
80% and liftoff. Drew Feustel, Oleg Artemyev, and Ricky Arnold taking off on their way to the International Space Station. Getting a great view of those first stage engines as they light up the night sky. That first stage delivering over 930,000 pounds of thrust.
20 seconds into flight, engines are steady.
20 seconds so far since liftoff, getting good calls that the stages are performing nominally or normally. Looking very bright here on camera. I can tell you when you see these at night, it's like looking at the sun. It almost hurts your eyes, but you can't tear your eyes away from it.
On board, and yes, we are seeing you on camera 1 screen.
"50 seconds since liftoff, everything's still nominal or normal. Soyuz rocket doing its job, all of the parameters or the data points for its trajectory looking good, continuing to rocket across the night sky." So we're 70 seconds, over a minute and 10 seconds into the flight, the vehicle already traveling at over 1,100 miles per hour.
"90 seconds into flight."
So again, this first stage going to continue firing until just before the 2-minute mark. First, we'll hear the escape tower being jettisoned. And then following that, those strap-on boosters, those 4 liquid-fueled boosters on the first stage will be jettisoned. We should hopefully get a good view of that here on the video, as it is a very crystal clear night. View inside the cabin, the crew is still doing good. And getting confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer here in Houston, good first stage separation, and the escape tower has been jettisoned. That drops away at an altitude of about 28 statute miles, the Soyuz traveling at over 3,300 miles an hour.
First stage separation.
Thumbs up from the crew.
Copy.
All right, now we'll get this animation. You can see the core stage also serving as the second stage. And so 2 minutes, 30 seconds into flight. What's it like inside that capsule right now?
You get some good G-forces. You know, first stage was good. Right there with the launch shroud jettison, that's a very dynamic event. You can see out the windows, and you got thrust behind you. You're pushed back in your seat, and that makes you smile.
On board, and we also confirm launch shroud jettison. 180 seconds into flight.
Everything's still looking great for the rocket. Over 48 miles in altitude already.
We are seeing
traveling at a speed of about 4,700 miles per hour. That core stage, and there we go. Getting our first view of Ricky Arnold there in the right seat. All smiles looking like. And we can see his 0G indicator just over his shoulder there. The hula girl for Soyuz call sign Hawaii.
Copy, everything is fine on board. We're feeling excellent. Also,
this core stage is about 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, and provides between 178,000 and 222,000 pounds of thrust. That depending on where they are in the Earth's atmosphere, and that continues for 3 minutes and 28 seconds of operation. Once this second stage has done its job, it'll cut off, and we'll see the third stage begin to ignite, and then the second stage will cut away and then drop back down to Earth. That's also why, if you look at this animation just before that orange section kind of in the middle of the rocket, there's a lattice-like structure, and that allows the third stage engine to fire before that second stage drops away. But 4 minutes, 20 seconds since liftoff, everything's still continuing to go great, with the Soyuz getting good performance calls from the teams over in the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov.
Prior to second stage separation, copy Baikonur lead, we're standing by.
And so while they continue to fly uphill, I've always wanted to ask, when we get those in-cabin views, it almost looks boring for the crew in there. Like it almost looks like there's not a whole lot going on, but it's got to feel completely different when you're sitting in that seat.
It feels completely different when you're in that seat. There is nothing boring about this phase of spaceflight at all. This is about as exciting as it comes. Landing is maybe a bit more interesting, but this is as exciting as it comes.
Copy.
All right, well, all the crew inside. Again, NASA astronauts Drew Feustel and Ricky Arnold, and Oleg Artemyev, the Soyuz commander, there in the center seat. over 5 minutes and 23 seconds into their flight. Keep an eye on all of those different talismans hanging over them. Once that third stage cuts off, you should see those start to float, and then that'll be kind of your first view of life in microgravity.
Excellent, and in celebration mood. Copy. 340 seconds into flight. Copy. And combustion chamber pressure is nominal. Copy.
And so at this point, the second stage booster is already cut away, that coming at an altitude of about 105 miles, now being propelled by that single engine of the third stage, providing 67,000 pounds of thrust. It's going to continue to burn for 4 minutes and 2 seconds until that 8-minute and 45-second post-launch mark, at which point it will cut away and separate, and the spacecraft will be in orbit.
Everything on board is fine.
Dan, everybody's always asking what it feels like inside when you launch, and in the lower right of this schematic here, you can see it almost looks like a zigzag pattern there, a jigsaw pattern, but that's the G-load that the crew is feeling. That's what's pushing them back in their seats. So you can see first stage goes up to 4G, and then when first stage cuts out, there's that huge vertical drop-off, and then second stage builds up as the fuel weight reduces, and then there's another vertical drop-off, and now they're painting a new line on third stage, so they're not even at 2 times Earth's gravity right now, so they're just gently being pushed back in their seat, just enough to know that that engine is running.
Roll or nominal. Copy.
Those are pretty quick drop-offs.
They're instantaneous drop-offs, so you definitely feel those. Those are very dynamic phases of the ascent.
All right, well, still getting good calls, normal performance of this third stage engine. We're about 7.5 minutes into the flight, velocity approaching 13,500 miles an hour.
Everything is nominal. Copy.
Again, once that third stage is done with its job, the Soyuz will separate, then they'll execute a series of commands, all pre-programmed in, to prepare the Soyuz to fly around in outer space. And those will allow all the onboard computers to deploy the solar arrays, which you can see the blue cells folded up alongside the body, and also a bunch of antennas. But everything's still looking great. We should have about 40 seconds until that third stage cutoff.
Nominal on board, and the crew mood is festive. And you have 30 seconds prior to third stage separation. Copy. 500 seconds into flight, everything is nominal. $510 seconds into flight. $520 seconds into flight. Please be prepared for GECA-3 command. We are ready.
And there we see that bit of a jolt. You can see the talisman starting to float, and I think they're in outer space now.
Welcome to low Earth orbit.
Congratulations with the successful launch and insertion into orbit. Have an excellent flight, and good luck.
And we have confirmation the third stage has shut down and separated.
Hawaii, Moscow.
And getting confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer, all solar arrays and antennas have been deployed. So a healthy Soyuz spacecraft now in orbit. 3 crew members, Drew Feustel, Ricky Arnold, and Oleg Artemyev, ready to chase down the International Space Station. So their first taste of microgravity has got to be a feeling of relief, accomplishment, excitement, wonder. I can't imagine what's going through your head when you're in that moment right there.
I think you nailed it, Dan. Relief and extreme excitement, and then you see the crew. They're not taking any time to look outside right now, Dan. They're making sure their vehicle is safe to continue the mission. They're checking the pressurization systems. They were just closing some oxygen valves, and they're going to go through about a 30-minute process now of making sure that they are not leaking any of that precious atmosphere out into the vacuum of space. So this is actually a very busy time time for the crew. You can see Oleg and Drew there are kind of working in concert at the same time to make sure all of their systems look great.
5 seconds.
All right, well, since it's a 2-day flight for them, so with the 6-hour flight, do you get a chance to kind of relax and get out of your suit, or are you in that seat the entire time?
I never left that seat. Your commander gets out of the seat for just a few seconds, but the left and right seaters there, in this case it'd be Drew and Ricky, they wouldn't leave their seat. But in this 2-day profile, once they check their vehicle and everything looks good, they'll do a few orbital adjustment burns today, and then they actually have a chance to go to sleep up there.
All right, well, control and monitoring of the vehicle going to be overseen from this room that you're seeing right here, the Russian Mission Control Center just outside of Moscow. And again, they're relaying all the data over to us here in Mission Control Houston. Again, we heard good confirmation of solar array and antenna deploy. So a healthy Soyuz spacecraft in orbit, ready to begin its chase down of the International Space Station.
The AKG was not initiated when we pressed the initiation button. Well, I'm standing by for the first IP measurement. First measurement, this is Hawaii 2. Time is 20. As the pressure is 794. BO pressure is 002. BO pressure is 800. It is 855. Copy Hawaii. And now Hawaii.
All right, well, now that we have a crew safely in orbit, we wanted to take a couple moments, answer a few more Twitter questions. Again, if you can always use the hashtag AskNASA to send them along. This one comes from Manish Kumar Mishra, who wanted to know, how does the research that you're doing in space help prepare to send humans to Mars and beyond?
Well, it's all about just learning how to live and work up there. And then these trips that we will take to Mars, I would say in the near future, they're going to be years-long kind of trips, 6 months out, spend maybe a year or two on the surface and 6 months back, and we just want to know what happens to the human body and all that time. Radiation, your bones change, your muscle changes, your blood changes, your eyesight changes, your heart changes, everything changes. And so,
everything changes.
And then how do we build safer vehicles? What kind of materials do we use, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking, every day we're looking at all of those things. Even just something as simple as the water that we drink. How do we recycle all of that water? Those systems are on board the space station. How do we keep the oxygen level right in the atmosphere? All of that we need to learn in low Earth orbit before we head out. And the space station's been up there for almost 20 years. And these things, they're really coming into focus. So we're really getting prepared to head out on a deeper space journey.
All right. Our next one comes from Elise, a little bit of the lighter side. Can the crew watch TV, listen to the radio? What do you guys do for fun up there?
In the Soyuz, you cannot. You have your 2 crewmates in the Earth, and that should keep you entertained. But for the 6 months that you're on the space station, you get 1 channel of TV, and then you can request a few shows that are uplinked a couple times a week. So you actually stay pretty well entertained. But by far the thing you want to watch the most when you're up there is the Earth below you. It's always magical. It's always got something new for you to look at, and that really captures your fascination.
All right, this next one from Marcia Pohl. So this will be different depending on how your flight goes, but how long was it before you got to sleep on your launch day? So for you, it was different because
for me it was different, and it took a while. And that first night on the space station, you're in this crazy foreign world. The Soyuz is a tiny little spacecraft, so once they get their onboard systems checked out and everything is looking good, it's pretty, from what I hear, it's pretty easy to go to sleep in the Soyuz. And so I would say they're only a few hours away from being able to take that first nap.
All right. Okay, and then how do the astronauts typically spend their time when they're traveling towards the station? So on a 2-day, what are they kind of getting into? Because it is kind of a small space, but what can they do?
Well, they can listen to music, they can tell jokes to each other, they can read books if they brought any. Most crews are going to take something to keep them occupied. But then from time to time, they're going to be checking in with Moscow Mission Control. They're going to be doing orbital correction burns. They're going to be verifying that their spacecraft is safe. So in between some periods of downtime, they also have some pretty intense work to do.
All right, well, we got time for one more. This one's from Elise, and she wanted to know what it feels like to be in the rocket during launch. So if you had to pick kind of one thing that really stands out to you when you're on a rocket for a launch, what really kind of, what do you never forget?
Power.
Power.
You never forget that power. I mean, you were being hurled from 0 miles an hour to 17,000 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes.
That's pretty quick.
There's a lot of power.
It's a good 0 to 60 time. All right. Well, again, thanks for sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll continue to answer them on social media and any other time we do these kind of broadcasts, and hopefully anytime I can drag Reed on here with me. So keep on sending those in. We always love to hear from you guys. All right. Well, with the Soyuz now in orbit, it's going to arrive at the International Space Station in just 2 days. So we will have a couple of updates for you real quick on how you can watch all of that coming up.
55 is the third measurement. Copy is the third number of the measurement. Moscow, Hawaii, how do you copy? But you know, with interference, as if you're very...
All right. Well, immediately following today's broadcast, we're going to be bringing you launch replays from a bunch of the different cameras that were out there in Baikonur to watch that rocket lift off the pad. That'll be coming up right next. And then later today at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, we'll do a video file of the post-launch, giving you all the best views of the launch itself. And then any other interviews we got with some folks there on the ground in Baikonur to watch today's events. And then we will be back with our live coverage of this mission on Friday, March 23rd. And we'll be starting off at 2 p.m., so another great time of the day to watch a Soyuz flying through space. We'll come on the air at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern for docking coverage. They're scheduled to dock at 2:41 p.m. Central. Following that, they'll dock, they'll spend a couple of hours doing some leak checks and then get the hatches open. Hatch opening coverage will start at 4 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Eastern. The hatch opening is scheduled to come about 35 minutes later. Then the crew members will be able to go on board, greet their new crew members in their new home for the next 6 months, and then we'll close with that final video file of all of the highlights from that day's events.
Well, you know, the home is intermittent. We cannot hear you very well. Hawaii, you can loosen your shoulders, straps, open your visors, deactivate thermal sensors at the specified time. Copy regarding thermal sensors. The vehicle has been inserted into orbit, and the parameters of the orbit are all nominal.
All right, well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to watch these three humans blast off the face of planet Earth. I want to thank Reed Wiseman, NASA astronaut, for joining me here today on console. Reed, it's been a pleasure. Hope you had some fun.
Any chance I get to come to Mission Control, I'm here for you.
All right, we'll bring you back. All right, well, again, stick around. We're going to be bringing you replays of that fantastic night launch. So stick around, see that rocket lift off a few more times. Thanks again for joining us today. Come back on Friday to watch them dock to the International Space Station. But for now, that'll do it for us. This is Mission Control Houston.